this video we have a comparison between the Xiaomi 15 Ultra and the Vivo X100 Ultra. Let's find out how these stack up against each other with my own customized size natural on the Vivo, a feature that is a win in my book. We'll be comparing the daytime photography between both of them, testing portrait, periscope and more. So let's stack these against each other and find out their performance when it comes to photography. When it comes to comparisons, we always face the inevitable truth, the issue of preference. What I like may not be something that you like, and that's perfectly fine. After all, there is no wrong answer in what you prefer. Unless, of course, it's Taylor Swift music. Now, when using the Vivo X100 Ultra, I have my personal setup for size natural. -35 brightness, -65 saturation and +15 contrast. And sharpness is dialed all the way down to -100. This combination gives me images that I truly enjoy. It adds more depth while cutting down on the artificial sharpening we often see with Vivo. The contrast in particular lets the shot breathe a little bit more, giving a richer and more dynamic feel, without losing that dynamic range Vivo is known for. But let's talk about the Xiaomi 15 Ultra for a moment as well. One thing that stands out is the brightness. By default, the images tend to be a lot brighter. During the day, this is actually down to the result of not having that variable aperture anymore, which before of course limited the amount of light coming in. In most shots, I got the EV at -0.3, but realistically, I think it needs to go closer to -0.7 to get those shadows deeper, the shadows that I like. Of course, with editing, I can get pretty close though. Take for instance this boat shot. The extra brightness is immediately noticeable. Now I know some will actually prefer that kind of brightness, but for me it leans more towards the Vivo style. While when I look at the Vivo with this new setup, I see darker shadows and more contrast, and a subtler, more understated feel. It just resonates more with me when it comes to the shot itself. That being said, don't get me wrong, Xiaomi is still working on that device. It's newly released and it started off way better than the Xiaomi 14 Ultra ever did. Figuring out the sweet spot also is going to matter when it comes to this device, finding that perfect balance on the shots itself. So I will say, give it a little moment to evolve, because of course naturally the Vivo X100 Ultra had time to evolve as well. So now it's time to move to the periscope lenses, and there's a difference between the two. While both use the HP9 sensor, the Vivo offers a 3.7x zoom, whereas the Xiaomi goes further with a 4.3x zoom. That means that the Vivo X100 Ultra has an 85mm equivalent focal length, where the Xiaomi comes in at a 100mm equivalent focal length. That difference, no matter what, will lead to differences in the composition, though sometimes I will crop in a little bit on the Vivo to give you a more direct comparison. But here's the thing, even though the Xiaomi 15 Ultra tends to be brighter and noticeably sharper than what we're used to, it still has a lot of potential to maintain the feeling that we know from Xiaomi. Whether it's the way that it handles the color or how it separates them. The Xiaomi shows a distinction between those different hues. With the Vivo, however, you might notice that the colors can sometimes blend a bit together. Even though they are different colors, the contrast between the colors aren't as drastic as what we see on the Xiaomi. Now with the settings that I'm currently using on the Vivo X100 Ultra, I'd say it comes much closer to what I like to see. The contrast really adds the depth that I'm after, because by default size natural would look quite a bit more blended together and therefore flatter as well, and that would be too little contrast for my personal taste. Now of course both devices share the same sensor size, and in terms of details they are very close to each other. But let's also clear something up. The sharpening on the Xiaomi doesn't necessarily equate to more detail. I can easily increase that sharpness on the X100 Ultra to match that result. Sharpness and details are not the same thing. Personally, I feel actually like the Xiaomi 15 Ultra is a bit too sharp for my liking right now. Now, if there is one thing that Vivo is without a doubt better at, it's the white balance. Xiaomi tends to struggle with capturing warmer tones, which can throw off the overall balance of the shot itself. Naturally though, at the end when it comes to comparing a periscope versus periscope, especially if they are the same, it comes down to personal preference. And I'm very curious to know which one you would pick out of these two. And lastly, let's focus on the ultra wide. Yes, I'm aware that the Xiaomi 15 Ultra comes with an extra telephoto lens. But for this segment we are looking at a direct comparison between the different focal lengths that they offer. And therefore, with the telephoto being a miss on the Vivo X100 Ultra, we shouldn't compare those, because there isn't a comparison. When it comes to the ultra wide, we actually have the same equivalent focal length of 14mm on both devices. However, there is a difference in sensor size. The Vivo X100 carries a larger 1/2 inch sensor size, where the Xiaomi 15 Ultra uses a smaller 1/2.76 inch sensor size. Now, it's no secret that the ultra wide is the lens that I use least. There aren't many situations where I feel like I really need that ultra wide sensor, especially with how wide the main sensors are. The scenarios where I do though tend to be shots like this. But even then, both the Vivo X100 Ultra and the 15 Ultra fall a bit short. They're just not wide enough to capture a full scene like this and get the composition that I want out of it. Now naturally, we see some indoor shots with, for instance, this church, where the Vivo will easily outperform the Xiaomi. In terms of dynamic range, it simply is better, retaining more information because of it, especially in those LED light windows. That being said, there are some interesting things that I've noticed. The ultra wide on the Xiaomi tends to be less bright compared to the other sensors. This actually works in my advantage, but it also means that it's harder to balance those things between those different lenses on the Xiaomi. With the Vivo at the Open Air Museum, however, I was still experimenting with the style that I would get from the Size Natural. And yes, I did go overboard a little bit with some of those effects. In the end, the ultra wide shots are fine for both, but they're not lenses that intrigue me the most, and I think that's why the Xiaomi 15 Ultra opted for a smaller, less wide sensor compared to what you get on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. I feel like the larger audience doesn't use that ultra wide as much, especially when it comes to those main sensors being quite wide already. When it comes to photography, a quick shutter speed can make the difference. It allows you to capture moments that otherwise could slip away, whether it's animals or cars. Now, with both the Xiaomi and the Vivo, they have their own quick shutter modes. With the Vivo, it's snapshot, where Xiaomi uses fast shot. With these modes, you are typically planning your shots a little bit more carefully, like I'm doing here with, for instance, these car shots. But realistically, when it comes to the Vivo, I prefer shooting the normal mode and letting it decide for itself in terms of the shutter speed itself. This often results in clearer images, where with the car shots where I'm using snapshot, the shots can often come out soft and lose detail because of it. Now, when it comes to these bird shots, I didn't use any of those quicker modes. And credit where credit is due. In these shots, the Xiaomi actually performs better in terms of shutter speed. As mentioned earlier, I've fine-tuned the Vivo X100 Ultra to fit my preferences. But that customization stopped somewhat when I switched to portrait mode. In portrait mode we do have things like skin smoothing. You can control it, but honestly when you put it all the way down or have it off totally, it still does it. That being said, while I cannot control those settings, I do have some variety in the pre-selected styles to choose from. Now with the Xiaomi, it isn't much better in that regard either. While it doesn't try to hide imperfections like Vivo, it still struggles capturing the essence of the shot really well. The skin tones, for example, still need work. That said, I definitely think it's a step up from the 14 Ultra, where the portrait mode frankly was beyond poor at the start of it. But let's not forget the 13 Pro though. It was able to capture some amazing portrait shots. So I feel like they should be able to deliver the same on Xiaomi, but for some reason they really haven't. Between these two devices, portrait still feels like it is a feature that needs more refinement. Yet color wise, I'd have to go for Vivo honestly. Even though it can go overboard with its saturation, especially colors that are for instance green. There's something truly captivating about capturing flowers. Sometimes I find myself drawn to capturing even when it's not spring. The flowers around me at the moment are of course few and far between. And when it comes to style, I have to say Xiaomi knows how to handle reds. There's this amazing contrast they managed to achieve, one that really stands out. But on the flip side with Vivo, the contrast sometimes can feel a bit lacking. It's just not quite as striking as the Xiaomi 15 Ultra when it comes to those red colors especially. Yet, when it comes to macro photography, Vivo has a clear advantage. It's not always perfect and sometimes images can appear a bit unusual. But overall the Vivo X100 Ultra really excels at this area. It can get much closer to the subjects. On the other hand, when it comes to the Xiaomi, I found myself battling with focus. Over and over again, I tried to capture this macro shot, but for some reason, after finding the focus, it would straight away lose it.
Okay, 60 frames per second. Cars right next to me, so that's going to create some noise. Good noise test. Both auto wide. Now a 3x zoom for the telephoto and a 3.7x zoom for the Periscope. 4.3x Periscope now for of course the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Now max is technically more than 10, but I like the quick button. Let me just try to get this on 10. 10 for both. See on some cars. They look pretty similar. Back to main sensor.
Naturally, when it comes to comparisons, we always have to deal with the difference in styles and preference that really matters when it comes to these comparisons. That's why I never really tell you what you should feel like and which your preference should be. Your style is your preference and that's perfectly fine, and these two take a very different approach. That being said, what I really like about the Vivo is that approach where I can change those settings, allowing me to get closer to my preference. Now, naturally also we have to discuss that the Xiaomi 15 Ultra is recently released. Therefore we don't have the updates that we did get on the Vivo X100 Ultra, and therefore the X100 Ultra had more time to improve. That also being said, Xiaomi has been releasing phones for a while, and I do feel like they could release phones with a better optimized camera. Things like portrait, where it has that skin color issue and inconsistency of it, especially if I shoot myself, I feel like there, Xiaomi could deliver a better package. That also being said, Vivo isn't much better at it. With for instance skins, it does a lot of smoothing, and if I have it off, it should be off. Those are the main findings that I have when it comes to these kinds of comparisons, the differences between the two and the difference in terms of approach. I think both of them are capable of capturing amazing shots. In the right hands, these will deliver crystal clear images. That being said, I'm still curious which out of these two you would pick. And again, there is no wrong answer on which one your preference is. Either way, I do hope that you enjoyed this little bit of a different style when it comes to a comparison. I feel like when it comes to comparisons and having the images side by side and then just going into depth of the image can be a little bit tedious and a bit boring, and I feel like I want to do it a little bit different, tell more of a story and talk about experience between both of them. Therefore, this video had that kind of different approach. It's a test run and I want to see what you guys think of it. Either way, before we leave, I really want to thank my members. Thank you so much for the support that you guys have been giving me. It really means the world to me, and of course, if you want to become a member, you can. Some WAV files of these two will be uploaded to a drive where you can download them as a member. Either way, I do hope that you enjoyed this different kind of video when it comes to my comparison between the Vivo X100 Ultra and the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Stay tuned and subscribe, of course, for a comparison between the Xiaomi 15 Ultra and the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. And of course, some videos on Oppo as well. Either way, stay tuned and talk to you guys in the next.